Hey, what's up everybody? Lawler here. Going to be covering a recap for the grid in North America under week 4. But before we do that, as always, if you guys enjoy the content, make sure you give it a thumbs up, as well as make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you'd like to support me further, easiest way to do so, all the social medias that are rotating on the bottom left, you can find those in the description down below. Make sure you guys go give those a like and follow as well. So as I mentioned, the grid for week 4 of North America has finalized. Today's video, we're going to be breaking down all the results, all the teams that are involved. Obviously, 16 teams come in, 10 from RLCS and 6 from RLRS, and they battle it out in a group stage into a single elimination playoff bracket. Today, we're going to be breaking down the scores and try not to pay too much attention to the quarterfinal matches just because it makes for a very long video if we do so. With that said, we're going to start with groups A and B with Space Station, Charlotte Phoenix, Kansas City Pioneers, Pittsburgh Knights, Sonics, Xset, G2 Esports, and Alpine. Work through those, give us our top 4 out of that, as well as the lowers. Then we'll go down to C and D. So first up, Space Station versus Charlotte Phoenix. Not a whole lot to say. Space Station just the better team. Ended up winning through in their quarterfinal against Charlotte Phoenix. Ultimately, this game was just a matter of Space Station trying to get their feet wet. Obviously, the first match of the day is always kind of a little bit weird in regards to how teams approach it, but these are the ones that you have the expectation where the high seed should win all of them. The only time that did not happen in the quarterfinals is Pittsburgh Knights. This is the former Valence roster that I've been talking about. They had a really tough match against Kansas City Pioneers, who has been kind of having the hot hand as of late, but 2 overtimes, one going to 1 minute 12 seconds, the second one going to 40 seconds, but some pretty high scoring games ultimately where PK ends up eking out the win. So shout outs to PK. They have been moving all around and showing that they can be continuously competitive and winning some matchups that I didn't know they were going to or weren't going to initially. Kind of had that 50-50 on some of the matches, so they make it through. Sonics 3-0 Xset, and then G2 Esports versus Alpine. G2 wins over Alpine. A playstyle in G2 that left some to be desired. Alpine is a playstyle that usually works well against G2. Very fast, very chaotic. Sometimes G2 is very susceptible to that and losing to that, but able to hold on. Looks like the team house obviously making its mark. As we move into the semifinals, then you had G2 versus Sonics, continuing on with that, where they end up 3-0ing Sonics. First game, very close, 2-1 in G2's favor with 24 seconds into an OT, but then after that, G2 got back into form, and with everything in the rearview mirror, no issues with them whatsoever. They kind of just crushed through and end up getting the victory in a sweep. Above them, Space Station versus Pittsburgh Knights. Space Station to me is just the better team ultimately. Pittsburgh Knights is still in that early foundation of what they want to accomplish, but Space Station again is the just overall better team. I look at all the players on both ends, and when you look at them in just a 1-to-1 matchup, it's not saying that Pittsburgh Knights is bad. I think Pittsburgh Knights is a very talented roster, but not only are they lacking the experience in comparison to Space Station, but Space Station on an individual level in each player I think is just better. So it's kind of weird to provide analysis to situations like this when literally the other team to me is just, they're just better. It sounds really weird to kind of provide that analysis, but ultimately Space Station just the better team here and able to get another victory. So already in the top 2, Space Station and G2 as expected. Didn't expect it to be anybody else. Maybe Pittsburgh Knights played upset, but highly doubted on that one. So Space Station, G2 move on as we jump down then into the lower bracket. First match, Charlotte versus Kansas City Pioneers. Kansas City Pioneers again just the better team, so they move forward. Alpine versus Xset, exact same situation. Alpine with the addition of Mystic has been looking better and better. I talk about this team and have said it numerous times. Very talented roster, just lacked confidence in their own capabilities. Mystic has been a fantastic fit for them as a coach, someone that's very relatable, has been in high pressure situations and knows how to keep these guys level headed. So Mystic shown his worth, and it has been absolutely fantastic for Alpine. So glad to see them trending in the right direction as they both make it into lowers round 2. In the bottom half, it is Alpine, who just beat Xset, versus Pittsburgh Knights, who drops down after losing to Space Station. And in this one, Pittsburgh Knights just ended up having a better play style. Alpine obviously fast and chaotic, but if you can find a way to disrupt that or handle really heavy counterattacks, Pittsburgh Knights tend to do that quite well. I think their addition of their roster has been very solid with ZPS, and he's been very impactful. So first game does go to Alpine. They come out the gate swinging and get the victory. They do tend to overwhelm a lot of teams in game 1. Then after that, very close matches, 1-0, 3-0, and then 2-1 in the very last one. So Alpine did put up a fight, but Pittsburgh Knights ends up qualifying. So congrats to them. That's a big performance in top 8. And then on the other hand, Kansas City Pioneers and Sonics. Even though Sonics has consistently performed very well, I do see the upside of Kansas City Pioneers more and more with each week. Talking like 3 3 weeks ago, I said some pretty bold statements about Kansas City Pioneers. They said where they're going to use it as motivation, and they bounced back. So Kansas City Pioneers, again, another top 8 finish, 1 OT against Sonics in game 2 that they ended up losing. That was 4 minutes extra of gameplay, but everything else after that, Kansas City Pioneers just kind of overwhelms. That chaotic playstyle, I think they've really got a hold on, which sounds weird that I say it's chaotic, but they have a hold on it. So kind of weird concept in that. But ultimately, you got to give credit to them. They've been playing extremely well. I think the big difference has definitely been in memory. Talk about his defense, his capability. He's always been a level of consistency. When Chrome and I talked about them, Kansas City Pioneers have loved that addition, have been pretty keen on memory, but the one to focus on is Beast Mode. Beast Mode is this young kid. He's been 15 for literally only a few weeks, so he's been eligible to play at a very minimal time. They picked him up as a sub to kind of cheat the 2/3 rule system, and then when he was eligible of age for RLCS, they put him in as a full-time. So he is only going to get better. He is a young kid, not a lot of experience in the RLCS, but being thrown into this gauntlet of constant pressure and constant teams, he's kind of that rookie that a lot of us have our focus on, so make sure you pay attention to him. So 4 teams for Group A and B: Space Station G2, Kansas City Pioneers, and Pittsburgh Knights. I think it's a pretty good shot. The only ones that may have been mixed up there and notable results, probably Sonics and Alpine. I think both had a pretty good chance as well. Dropping down to Group C and D, we've got Energy, Version 1, Envy, United, Rogue, Omelet, The Peeps, and Plot Twist. This was a pretty stacked group in general between all of them. First one up was Energy versus Version 1. I ended up being on the Version 1 broadcast as always and going up against Energy. And even though it's a 3-0, it doesn't really tell the story. Version 1 put up a pretty good fight here in games 1 and 2. Game 1 was 3-2, super close. Game 2 is 2-1. Did go to OT for 3 minutes, where Version 1 eventually kind of fell apart on a big mistake. But Version 1 is slowly trending in the right direction. For Version 1 to go as close as it did, I think is a really big deal. But ultimately, Energy is a team that usually, in my opinion, starts a little bit slow. So by the end, they were feeling pretty good. It did feel like a warm-up match for Energy, if I'm being completely honest. Compared to last week, so last week they tried to do a little bit too much. It was a little bit too chaotic and trying to work in a bunch of different play styles to where they didn't ultimately do any one thing in particular really well. This week, talking to Fireburner, they did simplify it quite a bit and try to keep focused. The difficulty, though, is it made it too simple almost, where everything was pretty predictable. They had a really good job on Energy reading what V1 was trying to do, and ultimately they just could not find the back of the net. So again, V1 I think is doing a better job and is trying to create that separation about losing to or beating the teams, I should say, that are beneath them, the rival series teams, quote unquote, even though rival series isn't a thing anymore. But again, I think V1 early foundations, trying to figure out what they want to accomplish, and it's going to take some time. Energy, again, the better team. Right below that is Team Envy versus E United, and in Team Envy, they are really good. This is a team that I've had top 3 in the power rankings for quite a while now. It's just a matter of what Envy we got. Well, we've got the Envy that looks like they can win a championship kind of Envy during this tournament. So Envy dropped the first game against United. United obviously trying to figure out how one of Mike's and Pac-Man is going to be involved, and it does look like he has been playing really well. But against this Envy's defense, there's just not a whole lot you can do. United does get credit, though, because they were adjusting very well. They were making adaptations in the middle of the series, and you can see that in the score line. I mean, you're talking 4-2, 4-3, even though Envy puts up a ton of goals, which again, having to put up that many goals in a game is actually pretty rare nowadays in professional play. But the fact that United is still being able to find the back of the net against Envy, which their defense, I said, has been impeccable, this is a pretty big deal. So even though United does get the shorthand here, they do put up a pretty good fight. Dropping down to Rogue versus Omelet, not a whole lot to say about this one. I think Rogue's just the better team. Omelet, ever since I think it was BTS where they had that breakout performance, just have not looked as impactful as before. Not really sure, and I can't really provide too much insight. Didn't get to watch the series because I was busy with the V1 broadcast, but not really sure what's been going on with Omelet. Obviously, they were super hot. Commodity coming in, it's supposed to be this big roster, and they brought in Lion Blaze and stuff was supposed to be great, and they just haven't really had the results. They do have 2 OTs against Rogue, which they end up winning the first one at 3:45 and then losing off of a kickoff in the last one. But Rogue's just the better team. I don't know what's been going on with Omelet. I wish I could provide a little bit more insight without watching their matches, but ultimately, I just don't think they've adjusted well to the new format, and it may take some more time to figure it out. Teams that have adjusted to the format really well, other than the initial plays in the grid that they were dealing with some server issues and some ping issues, the Peeps have been looking freaking dominate. 3-0 here against Plot Twist. Didn't even have a chance. Like, this was just, you want to see teams that you consider towards the top, like your top 5, your top 6 teams, really create separation against the teams that are struggling to stay in the top 10. And this is one of those matches where Peeps just absolutely dominated Plot Twist. Peeps have talked about this. Gyro I've talked to about it, mentioned in previous videos. They essentially feel like they are a mini Space Station Gaming. When they are super aggressive on offense, they're hard to get past, and when they're on defense, they're even harder. So I think Peeps is a really solid team that is trending in a good direction, and they continue to put up results. That's number one thing. I want continuous and consistent results. Peeps is doing just that. They breeze through Plot Twist and then move on to Rogue, which Rogue does put up a pretty good fight, but they end up losing to the Peeps. Very close 1-goal games in a lot of these matches, and by a lot of these matches I mean all but one. One OT in game 4, which Rogue actually ended up taking at 2:47 into overtime, but then Peeps in game 5 really pulled it together and just clapped 4-1. So pretty good back and forth series, probably one of my favorite semifinals I would say in the group stage, but Peeps is on a tear. They keep going, and it doesn't look like anybody's going to stop them. In the other semifinal right above them is Energy versus Envy, which is 3-1 in favor of Envy. Starts off with 2 OTs back to back, a really good fight. This is like the 4th or 5th time that Energy and Envy have ran into each other when it comes to the grid or through regionals. So this is becoming a really fun rivalry. I hyped up and tried to hype up during the entire offseason the Rogue and Envy rivalry, which I do think that still persists because of the playstyle similarities, but it's really been Energy that stepped back up with Squishy. So Energy, the big thing to focus on is they're trying to find how Squishy's involvement is going to be more than just playing defense. His defense has been absolutely superb, but you saw a bunch against V1, Energy utilizing Squishy to move in and get more bumps and demos and being a bit more aggressive on the team to open up opportunities, which I think has made it a lot easier. So against a team like Envy, I think that's very difficult because the team is so quick and Turbo's positioning is just bar none one of the best in the world. So trying to catch those demos out, I think makes it difficult and leaves them susceptible to getting punished themselves. But they both trade in overtime. Game 1 goes to Energy, game 2 goes to overtime. It's a full 5-minute overtime, so technically game 3 as well. And Envy wins up winning that one, and then Energy's not able to bounce back. But it is close. 2 1-goal games to end the series. 1-goal games across every single match. This was a really fun one as well. But Envy does ultimately end up winning 3-1. They end up qualifying with the Peeps. We then jump down to the lower bracket to the version 1 game I casted alongside Supersonic for United. This one was another fun one. This is an exact same situation as last week in the grid where V1 played United, and same result as well, where V1 just can't close out in 5. Super close at the beginning where V1 comes out hot and we're like, all right, sick. This is starting to form really well. Then it gets held to 1 goal, and then it becomes a slugfest. I think this is the exciting thing about United and V1 is because both teams are trying to figure out what they're doing. United is a little bit more chaotic now with Wonder Mike. Ajax still performing extremely well. Hawkstar, I think, had a really good performance in this series as well to keep them close, but just too predictable from V1. They got to find a way to mix it up, work some of those infield passes, especially now that NA is getting a little bit more used to it. So this was really close up until game 4, and you thought, you know what, V1, you just won the OT in game 4. What ended up happening is Gimmick ended up trapping the ball in front of the net, and they gave him too much space. So he flicked it in at 0 seconds to bring them into overtime. They end up winning overtime immediately after off of a kickoff with follow-up, and it's like, all right, all the momentum's in V1's favor. They're looking good. They bounce back off for an overtime loss. Things are great, and then they lose 5-1. So that kind of sucks. V1 been struggling, man. They've been struggling. United, though, they get the win again in 5. Close match, rematch of last week, like I said. Then drop down to Omelet Plot Twist. Not a whole lot to say. First game was OT, and then Plot Twist ran away with it. I think Sos has been an absolute fantastic addition for Mektos and Taroko, and they show it there. Right now, Plot Twist to me is still that team that hovers in like the 10th place, 9th, 10th place area, from like 9th to like 12th, I would say, in my power rankings. They're a good team. It's just they've been facing some really tough competition. You're going to see that in a bit here. They do ultimately in the lower finals go up against Energy, and Energy, again, just a circumstance of being the better team. They're more creative. They're more offensively heavy. They got better mechanical players, and that's paired with a ton of experience. So unfortunately for Plot Twist, they're just facing the better team here. Energy gets the win, and the same thing applied in the one right above that. Rogue versus United. Rogue gets the 3-0, and they beat that one. The last 2 games were 1-goal games, 3-2 and 2-1. United, they put up a good fight, and again, when you see 3-0s, it doesn't really tell the story, but for the most part, it's pretty convincing to get those victories for Rogue. These are ones that they don't want to waste any time on, and as much as Rogue has been getting a rough time after the Envy loss, which we'll get to later, Rogue still continues to be super competitive. I consider them like a top 5, top 6 team in North America. So Rogue, again, it's weird because they make a change. They start to look really good in the offseason. At one point, I had them like top 2 in North America during the offseason. And then it comes to the super close matches and they go back to getting super close, but then letting down the fan base. And it sucks. It really sucks. So 4 teams for Group C and D are going to be Envy, Peeps, Rogue, and NRG, which wraps out our final 8. Playoffs are going to be Space Station and Rogue. We're going to start there. And Space Station has said numerous times, Red specifically, that they do not enjoy playing Rogue. Very minimally do we get to see where just stylistically a matchup favors one team or the other, and it goes that way. So Reddles has talked about the difficulty of playing against Rogue. Rogue is a team that is very awkward to play against for a team that is very structured like Space Station, where they try to interject a certain way. The chaotic approach to players like First Killer and Tur and Turo, I think can favor Rogue, but this one ultimately comes down to Kronovi. Even though I say and focus on the other two, Kronovi had a huge impact in this series in the quarterfinals where Kronovi just pretty much handled it. The other thing to mention, as I mentioned in my video yesterday, is that any of the playoff matches now do give a 1-game advantage to the teams that come from the upper bracket. So Space Station starts off technically with game 1. Rogue wins 3 in a row. Space Station gets a 3-0 win in game 4, and then Rogue wins an OT. So Space Station's got to figure out what it is about Rogue's playstyle that causes some confusion or some difficulty, but Rogue does end up beating technically Space Station 4-1. After Space Station's been so dominant for so long, this could be a series that a lot of other teams look at and be like, okay, what did Rogue do here that ultimately made us able to beat this roster? How are we going to take what they did and try to recreate that against a team like Space Station that's been so dominant? So Space Station's still a top 8 result, nothing to be shy away from, but that's a big win for Rogue. That's a really big win. Team Envy versus KC Pioneers, 4-0 sweep, and gonna kind of put this out there. As a heads up, Envy did not lose a single game in playoffs, period. They went 12-0 in playoffs. That's nuts. The only game they lost all day was in the qualifying match to Energy, where it went to OT and they lost 2-1. That's it. That's the only game Envy lost all day. And there's been a lot of questions about Envy in, was the Brawl a fluke? Was it a one-off thing? Was Envy going to be able to do it again? And I know it's not regionals, but to go through the 16 best teams and be one of the 16 best teams, so 15 teams in North America, and to win the whole thing is still a big deal. A lot of people don't weigh the grid as heavily, and there's a lot less pressure on it, but to not drop a single game in the playoffs against the best teams, and to also only drop 1 game, and that game being against Energy, as Envy, you got to be really proud of that. So really big props to Envy, kind of setting a precedent to that before we go through things, because obviously the video is already getting pretty long, but again, that's a really big deal for Envy, for them to play the way that they do. They end up 4-0ing Kansas City Pioneers, Rogue, and G2, so keep that in mind. Dropping on the next quarterfinal is going to be Energy and G2, battle to 7. This was a really fun quarterfinal match, absolutely cutthroat. G2 does get the 1-game advantage, and that's the difference maker. It was 3-3. I'm curious on what would happen if it would have been a game 7. You're talking 2 OTs, kind of back and forth, where Energy would win one, then G2 would win a couple, then Energy would win a couple. Pattern wise, G2 probably would have won the last one, but you just never know. So again, the 1-game advantage coming in handy for G2. Probably my favorite match, just because it's G2 Energy. A little bit of bias in that one. I would recommend going back and watching that one. I think James and Dazzler did a really good job on the cast too, so shout outs to those boys. And not the only sweep from Envy and Kansas City Pioneers was the other quarterfinal between the Peeps and Pittsburgh Knights. This is a revenge match as well. The boys playing their former team and former organization. They do get the 1-game advantage, and then 3-0. So Peeps, nobody standing in their way. Pretty much a statement that they wanted to make to the organization, it feels like. And they put their stamp of approval on it. Close matches though, 2-1 and 2-1 in games 1 and 2. And then in game 3, it was 4-1. So Peeps, still impressed. Peeps still playing really well. So continuing on with Peeps, we get into the semifinals where it's G2 versus the Peeps. And Peeps does have a playstyle that has shown to be advantageous against G2 in the past. But with the way that G2 has been playing, and what makes them so good is, especially being in the team house, having the coach on hand, all the players and the chemistry there, they have the ability to kind of go to the drawing board and come up with a strategy and implement that very quickly. I think that's G2's one of their biggest advantages, is the fact that they are in the team house. They have the ability to make adjustments from week to week at a very rapid pace. And you can see it here. Peeps is a playstyle that is developing, and they're trying to do better and better and try to emulate what has made Space Station so strong. And G2 has basically found a way to counter that ultimately. Kind of makes me curious on what would happen if G2 and Space Station were to play now as well. But the games are close, 2-1, 2-1, and then Peeps get a couple, 3-1 and 1-0. Then G2 bounces back, and then they close it out in overtime. Really close overtime as well. I forgot how that one ended. I'd have to go back and look. The 3-2 at 3:37 for G2. So 6-game series, pretty close. I still want to know how G2 and Space Station would handle, and if G2 has that playstyle that can kind of I guess counter what we're seeing out of Space Station. Again, I already mentioned Envy. We're going to follow them on the rest of the way. Envy, this is where they really started to heat up. Rogue is like, all right, man, this is sick. Things are great. We just beat the best team in North America. Everything's fantastic. And then you go over to the road broadcast, and Spaceman, who's covering it, is like, dude, I literally have nothing to say. Rogue is just playing bad, and there's no answer about it. And they were. Envy had an answer for everything. Rogue was throwing a ton of possession. They just didn't really have any sort of plan. And it feels like they put all their cards on the table against Space Station, got the win against Space Station. They're like, yep, better than we expected. We did everything we had to do, forgetting that there's the semifinals and the grand finals left. So There's not really a whole lot to talk about this one other than Envy just played way better. And you can see that. I mean, they even had a Brazil in game 3. Like, it was just wild. And yes, some of these games are 1-goal games, but Envy just dominated the field, pressure-wise and everything else, the entire time. Then moving on to the grand finals, Envy continued. This was the Envy that did not want to lose today. There was nothing standing in their way. We talk about teams getting good on the moment. They hit the best pace. They really strive to make this a recreation, kind of that flow state that has been talked about. And Envy was in a groove. Nothing was going to stop them today, not even a really solid looking G2. Game 1 was pretty telling where it was 4-2 Envy. It seems like they scored with ease. And then everything else after that, when G2's only scoring a 1-goal game, it's going to be very difficult to beat a team like Envy, whose defense is so solid. So teams getting more and more creative, trying to find opportunities and ways to open up the net. But with that, at the same time, you're starting to see defenses get better at handling that as well. And I think that's where Envy's biggest strength is. Their defense is superb. And they have a really good job at counterattacking. They have the ability to transition either way. And the fact that you're seeing Turbo Pulsa more involved on offense, I mean, he put out a tweet that he's joking about, and hopefully I can find it. But he talks about like 2 flip resets. He almost had the like most ridiculous pinch goal I've ever seen in my entire life. All of that in one day, not just over the course of like a tournament, but in one day he's hitting these mechanical things. So Turbo really leveling up his game. It's not just poo goals from Turbo anymore, and that's scary for everybody else. So Envy, ton of potential on this roster. Talked about it when I tried to get Envy to pick up the team in the first place. I am glad that they are being rewarded for it. So new home for Turbo. It's showing up well. The boys are grinding. It seems like they've got a good structure. And my focus now is on Turbo. Turbo has been a player for a while that has been able to kind of sit back and fill the role for a team. He's been able to basically take the back seat and have other players like Garrett who are more vocal and more the captain role, while Turbo puts his ego aside and goes, yep, do what I need to do. We'll get wins, and I'll do the grunt work. I think Turbo's now stepping into a new role where he has to be the captain. He has to be the leader of the team, but also still do that grunt work. And it's really interesting to see develop. So I've got a big eye on what Turbo does with this next regional and everything else that's going on, but super proud of Envy. They've been playing extremely well. That is going to wrap it up for this video. As always, I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, make sure you drop those down below. And if you guys have anything else you'd like to know, feel free to ask that as well. But that is going to wrap it up for me. As always, make sure you guys give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and we will catch you next time. Peace.